All right, so after you heard from Jerry Nadler and that partisan garbage, the Republicans are literally playing video of riots in cities like Portland, Seattle, around the country, the violence exhibited towards police. They're playing the video as part of the official testimony. It is unbelievable. It's a good day to, as you're listening to us here on the radio, also watch some of the videotaped or the TV coverage, and we play it for you here as you hear the cuts on the radio. You could also go to MikeOnline.com on your computer or your smartphone. Click Watch Mike on TV. You'll see these clips because the visuals are stunning. Again, as Nadler's talking about federal law enforcement turning on its own people, showing the projectiles being used to pelt cops with, the fires being set, the attempts to burn down buildings and courthouses. The Republicans are literally playing that video before the House Judiciary Committee. And so you can check it out at MikeOnline.com. And if you've missed it live or you're in the car and you're not able to see it now, be sure to subscribe to the Mike Gallagher Show YouTube channel. Just after you subscribe, just click on the little bell there and make sure you get notified for all of the highlights from the Mike Gallagher Show that you'll be able to see on our YouTube channel. So again, MikeOnline.com, watch Mike on TV, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and turn your radio up loud and clear because here we go with the Republican response.
Breaking now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
All right, you just heard House Judiciary Committee Chairman Nadler, but here is ranking Republican Committee member Jim Jordan, Congressman from Ohio, with a pretty fiery response and an opening statement of his own.
1 month later, October 2016, they used the dossier to spy on Carter Page. The salacious, unverified dossier, Jim Comey's words, not mine. They took it to the FISA court, didn't tell the courts that the Clintons paid for it, didn't tell the court that the guy who wrote the document, Christopher Steele, had already communicated to the Justice Department that he was, quote, desperate to stop Trump from getting elected. And guess what? There were 15 more lies that they told the court. 17 in total. They're outlined by the Inspector General, each and every one of them in his 400-page report. But guess what? Chairman Nadler refuses to allow Mr. Horowitz to come here and testify and answer our questions about the 17 lies the Obama-Biden administration told to the secret court. The Obama-Biden DOJ opened the investigation in July. They used a secret agent lady to spy on Papadopoulos in August. They lied to the FISA court in September. And they did all this without any basis for launching the investigation to begin with.
Now, Congressman Jordan goes on to talk a little bit about the Obama Justice Department and Nadler's refusal to allow Horowitz to testify. Listen to this.
Spying. That one word, that's why they're after you, Mr. Attorney General. 15 months ago, April 10th, 2019, in a Senate hearing, you said this sentence, quote, I think spying on a political campaign is a big deal. Spying on a political campaign is a big deal. It sure is. And since that day, when you had the courage to state the truth, they attacked you. They've been attacking you ever since, every day, every week, for simply stating the truth that the Obama-Biden administration spied on the Trump campaign. 1 year ago, New York Times headline said this. 1 year ago, quote, FBI sent investigator posing as assistant to meet with Trump aide in 2016. The FBI sent a young lady who used the name Azra Turk to meet Papadopoulos in September of 2016. They sent someone pretending to be someone else to meet a person associated with the Trump campaign. You know what they call that? You know what they call that? Spying.
There's Jim Jordan laying out the pretty clear and concise case of what the Obama administration did with regards to spying on the Trump campaign. Now, the moment of truth. Here comes the Attorney General himself, Bill Barr, sitting there listening to a withering attack from the House Judiciary Committee about how he aided and abetted the Trump administration. You heard it all. Let's listen now to the Attorney General, Bill Barr, and his response.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Jordan, I'm pleased to be here this morning. On behalf of the Department of Justice, I want to pay my respects to your colleague, Congressman John Lewis, an indomitable champion of civil rights and the rule of law. I think it is especially important to remember today that he pursued his cause passionately and successfully with unwavering commitment to nonviolence. As I said in my confirmation hearing, the Attorney General has a unique obligation. He holds in trust the fair and impartial administration of justice. He must ensure that there is one standard of justice that applies to everyone equally, and that criminal cases are handled even-handedly based on the law and the facts and without regard to political or personal considerations. And I can tell you that I've handled criminal matters that have come to me for decision in this way. The President has not attempted to interfere in these decisions. On the contrary, he has told me from the start that he expects me to exercise my independent judgment to make whatever call I think is right, and that is precisely what I've done. Indeed, it's precisely because I feel complete freedom to do what I think is right that induced me to serve once again as Attorney General. As you just said, Mr. Chairman, I served as Attorney General under President George H.W. Bush, and after that I spent many years in the corporate world. I'm almost 70 years old. I was almost 70 years old and slipping happily into retirement. I had nothing to prove, and I had no desire to return to government. I had no prior relationship with President Trump. Let me turn briefly to the several pressing issues of the day. The horrible killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis understandably jarred the whole country and forced us to reflect on long-standing issues in the nation. Those issues obviously relate to the relationship between law enforcement and the African-American community. Given our history, it's understandable that among Black Americans there's at least some ambivalence and often distrust toward the police. Until just last 50 years ago or so, our laws and our institutions were explicitly racist, explicitly discriminatory. It was not until the 60s that the civil rights movement finally succeeded in tearing down the Jim Crow edifice. Our laws finally came to formally embody the guarantee of equal protection. And since then, the work of securing civil rights has rightly focused on reforming institutions to ensure they better conform to our laws and to our aspirations. That work, it's important to acknowledge, has been increasingly successful. Police forces today are far more diverse than they've ever been. And there are both more Black police chiefs and more Black officers in the ranks. Although the death of George Floyd at the hands of the police was a shocking event, the fact is that these events are fortunately quite rare. According to statistics compiled by the Washington Post, the number of unarmed Black men killed by police so far this year is 8. The number of unarmed white men killed by police over the same period of time is 11. And the overall numbers of police shootings have been decreasing. Nevertheless, every instance of excessive force is unacceptable and must be addressed appropriately through legal process, as is happening now in Minneapolis. But apart from the numbers, I think these events strike a deep chord in the Black community because they are perceived as manifestations of a deeper, lingering concern that in encounters with police, Blacks will not be treated even-handedly. They will not be given the benefit of the doubt. They will be treated with greater suspicion. Senator Tim Scott has recounted the numerous times he's been unjustifiably pulled over on Capitol Hill. And as one prominent Black professional in Washington said to me, African Americans often feel treated as suspects first and citizens second. And I think these concerns are legitimate. At the same time, I think it would be an oversimplification to treat the problem as rooted in some deep-seated racism generally infecting our police departments. It seems far more likely that the problem stems from a complex mix of factors which can be addressed with focused attention over time. And we in law enforcement must be conscious of the concerns and ensure that we do not have two systems of justice. Unfortunately, some have chosen to respond to George Floyd's death in a far less productive way by demonizing the police, promoting slogans like "all cops are bastard," and making grossly irresponsible proposals to defund the police. The demonization of the police is not only unfair and inconsistent with principles of all people should be treated as individuals, but gravely injurious to the inner city communities. When communities turn on and pillory the police, officers naturally become more risk averse and crime rates soar. Unfortunately, we are seeing that now in many of our cities. The threat to Black lives posed by crime on the streets is massively greater than any threat posed by police misconduct. The leading cause of death for young Black males is homicide. Every year, approximately 7,500 Black Americans are victims of homicide. The vast majority of them, around 90%, are killed by other Blacks, mainly by gunfire. Each of those lives matter. It is for this reason that in selected cities where there has been an upsurge in violent crime, we are stepping up and bolstering the activities of our joint anti-crime task forces. Finally, I want to address a different breakdown in the rule of law that we've witnessed over the past 2 months. In the wake of George Floyd's death, violent rioters and anarchists have hijacked legitimate protests to wreak senseless havoc and destruction on innocent victims. The current situation in Portland is a telling example. Every night for the past 2 months, a mob of hundreds of rioters have laid siege to the federal courthouse and other nearby federal property. The rioters have come equipped for fight, armed with powerful slingshots, tasers, sledgehammers, saws, knives, rifles, and explosive devices. Inside the courthouse are a relatively small number of federal law enforcement personnel charged with a defensive mission to protect the courthouse. What unfolds nightly around the courthouse cannot reasonably be called protest. It is, by any objective measure, an assault on the government of the United States. As elected officials of the federal government, every member of this committee, regardless of your political views or your feelings about the Trump administration, should condemn violence against federal officers and the destruction of federal property. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate your listing for me the areas of concern in your opening statement, and I'm looking forward to addressing them all.
All right, there you go. I'm sure he will. What an interesting contrast. So you've got Nadler's shrill, over-the-top rhetoric, a personal attack, essentially, against the Attorney General. And in response, the Attorney General, calm, collected, began by acknowledging the contributions of civil rights activist Congressman John Lewis, going on to acknowledge the concerns that Black Americans have about law enforcement, but certainly accurately characterizing the rioting, the destruction that we have witnessed every night in cities like Portland and Seattle, and the attempt by law enforcement to keep this destruction. And remember, going back a few months, this started with mobs tearing down statues, as if somehow that's an appropriate response to the death of George Floyd. Tearing down a statue of Christopher Columbus. Boy, that really has a lot to do with the death of an African-American man in Minneapolis, huh? Tearing down George Washington statues or defacing statues of Washington in New York City and scrawling on the side of Federal Hall. That has a lot to do with the death of a Black man at the hands of the Minneapolis police. Do you think the American people are noticing the difference? Do you think the American people are seeing the difference between Nadler and Barr, between the Democrats and the Republicans? Welcome into the Mike Gallagher Show in the ReliefFactor.com studios. More of the testimony on Capitol Hill. Your calls as well if you'd like to join us.